in the 15th century, and Elmina became a permanent base for their trading expeditions into the interior and across the Atlantic Ocean. Once Elmina was established, it became a magnet of opportunity, attracting trade from the interior, reorienting the trade routes, and bringing goods south to the coast instead of north. So many societies declined in the interior because of that growth of opportunity on the coast.
Beginning in the first half of the 15th century, European merchants seeking gold sailed to West Africa in ships laden with trade goods as well as metals of all kinds, copper, brass, and iron. These would be exchanged for gold as well as for local goods from the interior. European sailors also brought home souvenirs from West Africa. Ivory salt cellars were among the world's first tourist art. Carved by African artisans in the late 15th and 16th centuries, the salt cellars depicted Europeans as stereotypical caricatures from an African perspective. They decorated the tables of many of the great dining halls of Europe. One uniquely significant commodity was also traded between West Africans and Europeans beginning in the 16th century: human beings. The presence of Europeans along African coasts ultimately led to the forced migrations of 12 million Africans. Trade in slaves to work the silver mines and plantations of the New World reached its peak during the 17th and 18th centuries. The trade generated by Europeans in West African markets began to support local African entrepreneurs. This generated a new class of elites whose wealth was based on the Atlantic slave trade. African merchant princes undermined the authority of traditional leaders and became rich at the expense of their communities.
There's a wonderful West African proverb which says that the mudfish in the water grows fat to the delight of the crocodile. And in the case of West African merchants, there's no doubt that they benefited from the trade along the coast. Eventually, they would be consumed by the mercantile interests of European traders.
European trade also spread into Asia. In order to regulate commerce, the British and Dutch governments created trade monopolies. The British Crown awarded the East India Company the exclusive right to Asian trade. The company immediately established itself throughout the Indian Ocean. The East Indian Company was owned by joint stock, an innovation in business organization.
Subscribers invested in the company and owned a piece of the profits corresponding to how much they had invested. This process of investment and ownership, joint ownership, developed into what became the world's stock markets.
What happened in the Americas, the point of origin for so much of the world's silver? The Potosi mine in Peru operated for nearly 3 centuries until the silver ran out. It's estimated that nearly 8 million Indians died at Potosi. In a second cycle of silver, in the first half of the 18th century, the output of Mexican silver mines grew to exceed that of Peru. 500 million Mexican silver pesos were minted during the 18th century. Shipped from Acapulco on the Manila galleons, Mexican pesos ruled the Chinese marketplace. They also found their way to India, Europe, even to West Africa, where pesos bought African slaves. And what about China, the empire that launched the global economy? By the 17th century, the Chinese demand for silver was disturbing many Ming officials. At first, they had thought silver had little practical worth and briefly enacted a ban on foreign trade in 1626. But Zhao Yuan, a native of Fujian province, argued that silver brought real economic benefits to those merchants who traveled to trade with Europeans.
When our Chinese subjects journey to trade in the Indian Ocean, the foreigners trade the goods we produce for the goods of others. But when engaging in trade in Luzon, we have designs solely on silver coins. 100 yen of Huzhou silk yarn worth 100 taels can be sold at a price of 200 to 300 taels there. Moreover, porcelain from Jiangxi, as well as sugar and fruit from my native Fujian, all are avidly desired by the foreigners.
China's demand for silver remained at the center of the world economic system until about 1750. Finally, tens of thousands of tons of silver glutted China's market. The value of silver fell, and China's economy was rocked by inflation. Fluctuating values of silver caused the real salaries of Chinese officials to rise and fall, encouraging graft and corruption. For Spain, the declining value of silver meant disaster, so much so that the Spanish crown actually experienced bankruptcies during these times of record silver production. But just as the Pacific economy stumbled, the Atlantic economy picked up, fed by profits from the circular movement of slaves, sugar, tobacco, and gold. Europeans weaned themselves from deficit trading of silver, and eventually the balance of economic power shifted in their favor. But even while silver was the preferred commodity throughout the vast portions of Europe and Asia, its acceptance was not entirely worldwide. Gold, shells, and other currencies also competed for the attention of traders, bankers, and creditors. What roles did traditional indigenous currencies and local choice play in the expanding global economy?
In the Americas, the traditional caripa of the Orinoco Basin, strings of shells, were one of the most important commodities for both Indians and Europeans. Both groups suffered from a chronic shortage of local coinage. Even in the 18th century, the Dutch found that everyday exchange was not with their coins, but rather with the indigenous shells. The growing circulation and broadening function of the shell beads were the result of the expanding world economy. Shell beads assumed all the characteristics of Western money. They had standard prices. They were used as a universal medium of exchange. They were used to pay taxes, and they were hoarded as savings. The shell beads acted as a kind of bridge between different economic systems. Global commodities required global currencies, though remarkably many currencies connected world regions even before 1500, like the cowrie shell that linked the Indian Ocean and the West Atlantic coast of Africa. Even after 1500, currencies weren't imposed on conquered territories. Sometimes, currencies were still chosen by the indigenous peoples, who continued to dictate the choice of the highly prized commodities they traded, and the currencies through which those commodities were valued and exchanged.
The quest for new commodities around the world led to the increased sophistication of transportation, marketing, and distribution of goods. Just as maritime trade had created a vast interconnection of silver markets throughout the world, the same web determined that when the value of silver fell, that too would be felt around the globe. The Spanish Empire owed its financial foundation to China. This cause and effect interaction stands as a forceful reminder that after 1571, much of what passed for local history could be accurately understood only through the wider lens of world history. Once connected, the fortunes of the continents were bound together forever.
you ever find it hard to get up in the morning? John does sometimes. John can smell breakfast.
Hey, darling.
Thanks, Mum.
You obviously had a good sleep.
Let's leave John alone for that. Every morning, John wakes up and gets out of bed just like we all do. But what would happen if John didn't have any bones? He'd be as floppy as a jellyfish, wouldn't he? We need our bones to support our body and to make it move. All the bones in our body make up our skeleton.
This is my skeleton puppet that I made. It can show you how my skeleton moves. See what happens when I lift my leg? There are joints in between my bones so I can bend them, like in my knee and hips. There are also joints in my arms, like in my elbow and shoulder. My skeleton puppet needs strings to make it move because it's only a puppet. But we don't need strings to make our skeleton move because we have muscles.
This muscle pulls your arm up. It's called the biceps. Put your hand on your arm and feel the biceps muscle moving when you lift your arm. This muscle is used to pull your arm down again. It's called the triceps. Can you feel it? It's not as big as the biceps because it doesn't have to work as hard. These two muscles, the biceps and triceps, work together to make your arm move up and down. There are more than 600 muscles in your body. Just like a car needs petrol to make it go, all your muscles need oxygen to make them work. Oxygen is a special part of the air we breathe. Remember John's big yawn. What was happening inside his body then? He took a deep breath of air into his lungs. Your lungs are like two big sponges inside your chest. They fill up with air when you breathe in. Look at the skeleton. Can you see how your lungs fit inside your ribs? Put your hands over your ribs and take a deep breath. What can you feel? Your chest goes up because it's filled with air. Now breathe out. What can you feel now? Your chest goes down because you've let the air out again. When you breathe in, your lungs fill up with air, and the oxygen in the air is collected by your blood. Then your blood carries the oxygen to all the parts of your body. But your blood can't move on its own. It's moved around by your heart. Look at the skeleton. See how your heart is inside your ribs? Your ribs are like a cage that protects your heart and lungs. Your heart is a strong pump. It pumps the blood all around your body, from the tips of your toes to the top of your head, and to all your muscles that move your bones. what makes all that happen? How do our muscles know what to do next? We must have missed something important.
You forgot my brain.
That's right. The brain controls everything we do. It's like our very own computer, sending messages out to the different parts of our body to tell them what to do. To make John lift his arm, his brain sent a message out. It sent it down to the biceps muscle and told it to pull John's arm up. When John smelt breakfast, his brain sent messages to his muscles to make him move to the kitchen. Lots of messages going to lots of muscles really fast.
Hey, darling.
Thanks, Mum.
You obviously had a good sleep.
John's going to need lots of energy today, and he gets energy from the food he eats. A good, healthy breakfast. John's body has to break his breakfast down so it can separate the useful bits from the useless bits. This is called digestion. And it all starts in John's mouth. While his teeth chew the cereal, his saliva, or spit, helps make the cereal go mushy so he can swallow it. Down goes the mushy cereal to his stomach to join